was first invited to a CBMC luncheon probably 1987 or 1988. Got involved in a weekly study and rolled up my sleeves and got involved with CBMC. What we have to give is where God's met us and done a work in our lives. Sharing what I've learned in walking through life, in dealing with marriage difficulties, in dealing with anger, and sharing how God's brought me through that. If God can do it with an old hockey player like me, and a not very good one at that he can certainly do it with them and where they're at.
Tom, I want to take you back a few years when we were both in Denver, Colorado for some coach training. A gentleman, after you had spoke that day, it was an emotional address you gave. He came over to me and he said, "Phil, thank God for Tom Whitney, because when I see Tom and hear him speak, I see Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit." That's a high compliment. What comes to mind when you hear that?
Two things that come to mind. The first is probably the more typical Tom. I sure know how to fool him. I guess the second is that one of the things I've been focusing on lately in my quiet time is just the challenge. Oswald Chambers said it this week, that sanctification is God indwelling us and making his presence in us, and that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. But our job as his children is to implement and obey what he's telling us to do. Paul tells us that we're to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, because it's God who's at work in us, both to will and to work his good pleasure. It's work, it's obedience, it's rolling up our sleeves and doing what God asks us to do.